Have you ever discovered something that made you question everything you thought you knew about someone you love? A few weeks ago, I stumbled upon a truth that shattered my sense of security and left me grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. My husband, who I've trusted implicitly for years, lied about his whereabouts. It was a small slip-up at first, a tiny inconsistency that I almost brushed aside, but it quickly unraveled into something much more significant. Now I'm left wondering, how well do we ever really know the people closest to us? I'm a 34-year-old woman, and I've been married to my husband, Tom, for 8 years. We met in college, shared a deep connection from the start, and have built a life together that I thought was rooted in honesty and mutual respect. We both have stable careers. I'm a graphic designer, while Tom works in sales, which allows us to maintain a comfortable lifestyle. Our relationship has seen its share of ups and downs, but nothing prepared me for the shock I experienced a few weeks ago. It all started on a typical Friday evening. Tom mentioned he had a late meeting with a client and would be home a bit later than usual. I didn't think much of it. His job often requires irregular hours. But when I bumped into a mutual friend at a local cafe who casually mentioned seeing Tom at a restaurant across town, my heart skipped a beat. Initially, I dismissed it as a simple misunderstanding or perhaps a last-minute change of plans. Yet, an unsettling feeling lingered. As days passed, I noticed other small discrepancies. His phone, usually left lying around, was now always in his pocket, and there were unexpected gaps in his schedule. The realization that Tom could be hiding something from me sparked a mix of confusion, hurt, and suspicion. Was I being paranoid, or was there something more sinister beneath the surface? These thoughts gnawed at me, leaving me in a state of constant anxiety and self-doubt. The person I believed to be my closest confidant suddenly felt like a stranger, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my world was about to change dramatically. As the days turned into weeks, the initial unease I felt began to morph into a pervasive sense of dread. Tom's behavior continued to shift in subtle but troubling ways. He started taking more business trips than usual, often with little notice, and his explanations seemed increasingly vague. Each time he left, I was left alone with my growing doubts and insecurities. Then came the first major curveball. One evening, while casually scrolling through social media, I stumbled across a post from one of Tom's colleagues. It was a group photo, tagged with a location that contradicted where Tom had said he was supposed to be. My heart sank as I realized this wasn't just a one-time mistake, but part of a larger pattern. Confronting Tom about this was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I approached him with the post, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. He seemed caught off guard, but quickly scrambled to provide an explanation. According to him, plans had changed last minute, and he hadn't had the time to update me. It was plausible, yet something about his demeanor, perhaps the slight hesitation before he spoke, made it hard to believe. This incident marked a turning point, amplifying my internal conflict. The trust that once formed the foundation of our marriage was now riddled with cracks, and I found myself trapped in a cycle of suspicion and guilt. I wanted to believe him, to restore our former sense of security, but the weight of uncertainty was relentless. As if the emotional strain wasn't enough, the situation was compounded by an unexpected financial strain. Tom mentioned his commission payments were delayed, adding to the tension at home. We had always maintained separate accounts with a shared one for household expenses, but now there were unexplained withdrawals from our joint account that Tom attributed to covering unexpected work-related costs. I found myself constantly anxious, my mind jumping to worst-case scenarios. Was there a connection between his lies and our financial issues? Was this a symptom of a larger problem neither of us had acknowledged? The stress began to affect my work, my social life, and even my health. I became more withdrawn, unsure who to confide in without breaching the privacy of our marriage. Nights were spent tossing and turning, replaying every conversation, every odd behavior, trying to piece together a puzzle that seemed to only expand with each new discovery. It was in this swirl of confusion and frustration that I realized I needed to take action, to seek clarity for my own peace of mind. But what would that action look like? And was I prepared for whatever truth it might reveal? Determined to find clarity, I decided to tackle the issue head-on, beginning with open communication. I sat Tom down for a heart-to-heart, laying my cards on the table. I shared my feelings of anxiety and mistrust, emphasizing the need for honesty if we were to rebuild what had been damaged. My hope was that by confronting the problem together, we might find a path forward. To my relief, Tom seemed receptive, acknowledging my concerns without becoming defensive. He assured me that he would make an effort to be more transparent about his whereabouts and financial matters. For a moment, it felt like a weight had been lifted, and I dared to hope that we could work through this together. In parallel, I sought advice from trusted friends, discreetly discussing the situation without revealing too much detail. Their perspectives were invaluable, providing both comfort and practical suggestions. One friend recommended we consider couples therapy to facilitate open dialogue, a suggestion I brought up with Tom, who surprisingly agreed. However, just as I started to feel a glimmer of hope, a second curveball hit. A few weeks into our efforts to communicate better, Tom received an urgent call from his family. His father had fallen ill, necessitating frequent trips out of town. This added strain tested our fragile peace, as the timing couldn't have been worse. The constant travel meant that our planned therapy sessions were often postponed, and the stress of his father's condition weighed heavily on both of us. It was challenging to maintain the progress we'd started making, and I found myself battling feelings of isolation once more. To cope, I immersed myself in work and hobbies, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I also began keeping a detailed account of our finances, hoping to address the unexplained discrepancies by tracking every expense meticulously. This was both a practical measure and a way to regain some control over a situation that felt overwhelmingly chaotic. Despite these efforts, obstacles persisted. The unpredictability of Tom's schedule and the emotional toll of his father's illness meant that our communication often took a backseat. It was frustrating to feel like we were constantly taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and I couldn't shake the fear that our relationship might not withstand these compounded pressures. With each passing day, the question of how to truly resolve the underlying issues grew more pressing. Was there a way to reconcile trust and transparency, or were we destined to remain caught in this cycle of doubt and uncertainty? As the situation with Tom continued to unfold, I found myself engulfed in a tidal wave of emotions that I could neither anticipate nor control. The constant suspicion and need for vigilance took a heavy toll on my mental health, leaving me exhausted and on edge. I felt like I was living a double life, externally maintaining the facade of a functioning relationship, while internally grappling with a maelstrom of doubt and fear. Socially, I became increasingly withdrawn. Friends who used to invite us for dinners or casual get-togethers noticed my hesitance and started reaching out less frequently. I felt embarrassed to explain why I was often unavailable or why my mind seemed perpetually preoccupied. The isolation was palpable, and as much as I longed for connection, I feared the judgment or pity that might follow if I shared my story. At work, my concentration wavered. Projects that once excited me now felt burdensome, and my creativity, a cornerstone of my career as a graphic designer, seemed stifled by the personal turmoil I couldn't shake off. I worried that colleagues might notice my lack of focus, and I dreaded the possibility that this could affect my professional reputation. The emotional distance between Tom and me grew wider, despite our attempts at communication. Small disagreements, once easily resolved, now escalated into full-blown arguments, often leaving us both drained and resentful. I missed the ease with which we once shared our days, the laughter that punctuated our evenings, and the comfort of knowing that we could rely on one another without hesitation. Internally, I battled with feelings of inadequacy and hopelessness. I questioned my own judgment and wondered if I had somehow failed in recognizing the signs earlier. The uncertainty of our future weighed heavily on my heart, and I struggled to envision a path forward that didn't feel shrouded in doubt. As much as I wanted to believe that love could conquer all, the relentless strain of the situation made me wonder if we were fighting a losing battle. The idea of reaching a resolution felt increasingly elusive, and each day seemed to blend into the next without any clear resolution in sight. This experience has forced me to confront the harsh reality of how fragile trust can be and how its absence can seep into every aspect of life, leaving nothing untouched. I longed for peace and clarity, yet found myself trapped in a cycle of uncertainty and despair, unsure of how or when it might end. As the situation dragged on with no resolution in sight, I found myself contemplating measures I had never before considered. It became increasingly clear that our current efforts to rebuild trust and communication were not enough to bridge the growing chasm between Tom and me. The thought of separation, once unimaginable, began to loom large in my mind as a potential path to reclaim my peace of mind. This was not a decision I took lightly. The idea of leaving behind the life we had built together filled me with dread and sadness. I worried about the social stigma of a separation, especially when the reasons weren't entirely clear-cut to outsiders. Would people understand my decision, or would they see it as a failure on my part to maintain our marriage? Financially, the prospect of living on a single income also weighed heavily on me. Could I afford to maintain my current lifestyle, or would I need to make significant sacrifices? The practicalities of such a drastic measure were daunting, and I couldn't help but fear the impact on both our lives. Emotionally, the thought of moving forward without Tom was equally troubling. Despite everything, there was still a part of me that held on to the hope that we could find a way through this together. But with each passing day, that hope felt more like a distant memory, replaced by the stark reality of our fractured relationship. I felt torn between the need to take decisive action for my own well-being and the fear of what such a decision would mean for my future. Was I prepared to face the loneliness and uncertainty that might follow? Would this drastic measure bring the clarity and peace I so desperately sought, or would it only lead to more heartache? In the end, I knew I needed to weigh my options carefully, considering both the potential benefits and the long-term consequences. It was a pivotal moment, one that forced me to confront my deepest fears and desires, and to question what I truly wanted from life moving forward. Reflecting on this turbulent journey, I find myself standing at a crossroads, emotionally drained yet hopeful for clarity. The past weeks have been a roller coaster of emotions, ranging from confusion and suspicion to fleeting moments of hope and understanding. Each day feels like an emotional tug of war, and while I've tried to navigate this storm with patience and resilience, I realize that I'm now at a point where I need outside perspectives. I've shared my story here, not only to unburden myself, but also in hopes of receiving advice or support from those who might have walked a similar path. Have you ever faced a situation where the trust in a relationship was severely tested? How did you navigate the doubts and fears that accompanied it? If you found a way to rebuild trust, I would be grateful for any insights or strategies that worked for you. While I know there's no magic solution to this complex situation, I'm hopeful that your experiences might shed light on paths I haven't yet considered. Whether it's a suggestion for rekindling communication, a personal anecdote about finding peace, or even just a word of encouragement, your thoughts are welcome. In the end, perhaps this is simply a moment of catharsis, a chance to articulate my fears and uncertainties, acknowledging that sometimes sharing our burdens can be the first step toward healing. Thank you for reading and for any wisdom you might offer. I'm truly grateful for this community's support. TLDR. I'm a 34-year-old woman who discovered my husband lied about his whereabouts. Despite attempts at communication and therapy, trust remains broken. Seeking advice on rebuilding trust or moving forward.